Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Before we begin, I'd just like to apologise in case I mispronounce any te reo Māori words. I'll do my best to say them correctly. My name is Adora and I'm your MC for tonight's Auckland final of the Race Unity Speech Awards. It's my pleasure to extend a warm welcome to you all on behalf of the New Zealand Baha'i community, which initiated the Speech Awards in 2001 in support of Race Relations Day. To our 6 speakers tonight, congratulations for making it to the Auckland final, all the best, and we look forward to hearing your speeches. I'd like to start off by acknowledging the New Zealand Police, who have been our principal sponsors since 2008. I want to thank and acknowledge the Hiri Moani Charitable Trust and the Human Rights Commission, who have both supported this initiative from the very beginning. The Office of Ethnic Communities and Speech New Zealand are also sponsoring this year's Speech Awards and have supported us in various ways for many years. This year, we are delighted to announce that Te Taura Whiri I Te Reo Māori, the Māori Language Commission, the Manukau Institute of Technology, and Studio Mark have also become sponsors and partners in this initiative. Finally, I'd like to thank the New Zealand Federation of Multicultural Councils, which is a long-standing supporter of the awards. We are enormously grateful to all of them. Tonight, we will be hearing speeches from students in years 12 and 13 on the theme, Titiro Whakamuri kia anga whakamua. To face the future, look to the past. Students must address at least 2 of the following 4 questions in their speeches. Number 1, what can we learn from our ancestors and the leaders of the past about how to eradicate racial prejudice? Number 2, how might we commemorate events in our past in a way that helps bring about justice and unity today? Number 3, what do you think race relations in Aotearoa should look like 20 years from now? And what do we need to do now in order to secure this future? Number 4, what do New Zealand's leaders and people of influence need to do in order to support young people in their efforts to improve race relations? Students must also include at least 1 whakatauki, proverb, or whakatauaki quotation in their speech, choosing from the following 3 options. Number 1, e tu ki te kai o te waka, kia pakia koe, e nā naru o te wā. Stand at the stern of the canoe and feel the spray of the water biting at your face. That was gifted to the New Zealand Police by the late Dr. Apirana Mahuika. Number 2, consider not the present condition, but rather foresee the future and the end. A seed in the beginning is very small, but in the end, a great tree. One should not consider the seed, but the tree and its abundance of blossoms, leaves, and fruits. Abdu'l-Baha, Baha'i Faith. Number 3, students may choose a quotation or proverb from their own faith or cultural background. Tonight, we have 6 speakers. Each of them have already been successful in the regional heats in order to reach tonight's final. They have also already qualified to present their speech in the national semi-finals occurring next week. So tonight's competition is purely to determine who the Auckland winner is for 2020 and the Auckland runner-up, and also to celebrate the success of all the students for reaching this final. Our timekeeper tonight is Sophia Motadi. Our judges are Sean Lim from the Office of Ethnic Communities, Rebecca Tomlin from the New Zealand Police, and our Chief Judge is Ryan Mearns from the Human Rights Commission. I now invite each of them to briefly introduce themselves and speak a little bit about the organisation's support of the Speech Awards and why they think it is of value. We'll start off with our Chief Judge.
Kia ora everybody, my name's Ryan. I work at the Human Rights Commission as a senior advisor within our comms team and also advise our Chief Human Rights Commissioner, Paul Hunt. I'm really glad to be joining you tonight and hearing your speeches. A lot of my work early on at the Commission was around our anti-racism campaign called Give Nothing to Racism. And so I've been listening to speeches for a few years, and they always give me inspiration to do some of the work that we do at the Commission. And every year I end up editing some of the footage of students who do their speeches, and I'm just always blown away by what they produce and how captivating they are to people. I think a speech last year by Takunda had about 1.5 million views online. So you can some of these speeches have real impact. And so I wish you all well tonight. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to contribute and some of your ideas for race relations in New Zealand. And as representative here on the Human Rights Commission, we're keen to hear your ideas, and I really want to take them on board as well. So anything you have to provide is definitely going to be extremely useful. So thank you so much, and good luck tonight.
Kia ora everybody, my name's Rebecca Tomlin, and I am here representing New Zealand Police. I'm really excited to be here today or tonight because I think that there's a lot of valuable information that our speakers will give us that will allow us to go away and think about how we might do things differently to make race relations better personally or in our workplaces. The New Zealand Police are really proud to be the main sponsor for this event. It's an important platform for building and initiating change in New Zealand, and I think that is especially so in light of the recent race hate attacks that have happened in Christchurch with the mosque shootings, and then in our current environment with COVID, where our Chinese community have been targeted. I know that each contestant that's going to be speaking tonight will have put in a huge amount of mahi, and I think that really demonstrates the commitment that they have to ensuring that this dialogue happens. So thank you for your efforts. I know also that they would have had significant support from their schools, families and friends who have also shown commitment to ensuring that this discussion happens. So I'd like to say good luck to everybody, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say and what things I can take away to think about.
Tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Sean, and I am a Diversity and Engagement Advisor from the Office of Ethnic Communities. I'd like to say that the Office of Ethnic Communities are really happy to be supporting this event. Diversity and race unity is something that we're really passionate about. Personally, it's an honor to be one of the judges, and this is my second time, and I really treasure this opportunity to listen to some great speeches. And to our 6 speakers tonight, all of you have come a really, really long way, and I would like to say that for you guys to be really proud of yourselves. So all the best for tonight's competition.
Thank you. Let's quickly go through the rules again. All speeches must be between 7 to 8 minutes duration. Any speaker whose speech is under 6.5 minutes or over 8.5 minutes may have points deducted, or in the case of a serious time breach, they may be disqualified, but that is at the discretion of the judges. Speakers have arranged for someone in the same room as them to give them 5, 7, and 8 minute time warnings, but nothing will be visible or audible to you when you watch their speech. Judges will have up to 3 minutes to mark each speaker, and marking is allocated as per the Toastmasters model, 50% for content, 30% for delivery, and 20% for the use of language. Speeches can be delivered in Te Reo Māori or in English, but in tonight's final, all students are delivering their speeches in English. I want to thank you all for joining us online for the Speech Awards. We've never done anything like this before. COVID-19 is forcing us to use the right hemispheres of our minds a lot more. We're finding creative ways of staying in touch with one another. And it's still vital that Aotearoa gets to hear what youth have to say about improving race relations in this country. So thank you for listening. We usually have lots of applause to encourage our speakers, but given the situation we're in, it's a bit difficult to do so. So to whoever's in the same room as one of our speakers, please clap extra loud on behalf of all of us. And also, please make sure your phone's on silent. Now it's the time we've all been waiting for, to get ready to be challenged, to be inspired, and to celebrate the talent and diversity of the young people speaking tonight. It's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Olivia Pierce, a Year 12 student from Diocesan School for Girls.
Kia ora. Oh, you're Māori, so you're on the benefit. Oh, you're Chinese, so you can't really drive. Oh, you're Colombian, so do you deal drugs? Stereotypes regularly thought and unfortunately often spoken. And we say that racism isn't an issue in Aotearoa. Somewhere I read that a nation's culture resides in the heart and in the soul of its people. But in modern day Aotearoa, that is not the case, for we as a nation are not nurturing and accepting all of the cultures that reside in Aotearoa, despite the fact that we are and will continue to be a melting pot of cultures. Aotearoa is my aipukarea, a singular word that means a place that represents the history and emotional attachment of the tribe, a place central to the identity of the people where they can go to be rejuvenated, a place that represents the hopes and aspirations of the people, the life-giving waters from which they drink. That is Aotearoa. We weren't always so diverse. A long time ago, we were one culture, Māori. The Māori people had navigated for the stars to find the land that we stand upon today. They made it their sole responsibility to care for this land as their spirituality guided them to do so. Everything changed when Captain James Cook arrived on his ship of discovery, and eventually the European settlers arrived. They did not share the same beliefs with the Māori people. They believed that they owned their land and they could do what they pleased to it. They also believed that they had a right to the land that they saw before them. They called the Māori people savages, but they were the ones causing mass destruction to the environment around them. The Māori people were in a battle. They clutched their taiaha, patu, and their tau, but the Europeans had a much more powerful weapon, the Bible. Slowly but surely, they began forcing the Bible down the throat of the Māori people. They spoke of God, mighty and all-knowing, as they began to chip away at the natural resources of the land. They spoke of God, the one who determines fate, as they sent in more and more ships of people. They spoke of God, whose mother tongue was English, and they convinced the Māori people that in order for them to have a healthy relationship with God, they needed to learn this language as well and abandon their own. So, while they were giving Māori people the gift of God, technological advancements, and education, They were running the resources dry, taking land, animals, and most importantly, power. So much destruction and deception happened at the time, I find it hard to believe that it was part of God's plan. They had been swindled. The Māori people walked away with the Bibles, while the Europeans walked away with everything else. People today lack an appreciation for the issues of the formation of our nation. I know it sounds a tad extreme, but none of us would have the well-preserved country we do right now without the benevolent actions of the Māori people in the past. We chop, change, and utilize this land so selfishly, so greedily, at such a pace, not stopping, never stopping to remember the whakamahi, the work of the Māori people. I hear people arguing that they should have gotten into a certain university course ahead of those in the Māori demographic. I also hear people arguing that they are cultured enough for a scholarship and that is all they need. Although people are forgetting those that were killed, stolen from, and deceived during the formation of our country. And although the Waitangi Tribunal is still trying to work to solve the issues of the past, they cannot resolve the outlooks that have been brought into modern day New Zealand. So what does culture mean now? There are people living in Aotearoa that can't even manage to open their mouths during the Māori verse to our national anthem, a verse that the Māori people, my people, our people, fought, killed, and died for. And they can't even string together the 25 words that are the kapia, the glue, that hold our nation together. There was one moment that I will solemnly never forget. There was a young girl, a few years younger than me, who was laughing to her mates after full school assembly saying, "I don't even know the Maori verse, I just put on more chapstick." I'm sorry to say, little girl, but there are more important things in this world than your chapstick. Thousands of people living in Aotearoa, just like that girl, don't know the 25 words that are the kapia, the glue that hold our nation together. In 2018, Diocesan Kapahaka Group performed at Polyfest for the first time in decades. Last year and this year, there weren't even enough members to fill the stage. And when we were there, many of the members of our group were called plastic, uncultured, and stiff. Polyfest is meant to be a place where culture can be embraced and celebrated, yet so many girls from my school felt like they didn't belong there. True story. So, is culture meant to be celebrated by all, or only those that belong to Indigenous groups? In 20 years' time, I pray that the state we are in now will change. That time will allow us to leave the issues of the past where they belong, in the past. That a person will not be categorized by their ethnic group. Every single culture deserves equal respect and admiration. As at the end of the day, your race does not define you. We should define people by their character and their actions, not by pre-constructed labels made by strangers of the past. Toku reo, toku oho, oho. Toku reo, toku māpihi maurea. Toku reo, toku whakakai marihi. My language is my cherished possession. My language is my precious adornment. My language is the object of my affection. We need to incorporate te reo more in our daily lives, especially in education. It is an official language of Aotearoa and should be treated that way. As the language slowly becomes less popular, more and more New Zealanders are losing their vital connection to Māori culture in New Zealand. By incorporating te reo in our daily lives, we can ensure that loss of Māori culture will not continue. Time may continue to pass at the same rate, but we need to ensure that loss of Māori culture doesn't synchronize to the turning of the hands. The way to maintain culture is to celebrate it as a community. We should feel encouraged to get involved in cultural activities that represent and celebrate all of the cultures that reside in Aotearoa. We shouldn't be divided and defined by our ethnic groups. And we need to ensure that smaller ethnic demographics don't feel like they're trapped on the outside looking in. Racism didn't belong in history. Racism doesn't belong in the workforce. Racism doesn't belong in schools. Racism doesn't belong in New Zealand. We as a nation define ourselves as peaceful and inclusive. Shouldn't we put actions to words? Even though our current state of race relations is better than in those in other countries, it doesn't mean there isn't work to be done. We must face the fact that we still have much to do in the area of race relations. It's not difficult. We need to make change today for a better tomorrow.
Thank you, Olivia. Our second speaker is Tilamai Teleofoa, who is in Year 12 from Papatoetoe High School.
We have a Samoan saying, "Ole laulau whaiva, ole pelu ma'ai." The tongue is the sharpest weapon. It is manipulative, persuasive, and cunning. It has the power to bring everything together, like the hands of man used to make this pencil. But with power comes consequences, and if not controlled, everything falls apart. The human brain is like this pencil, vulnerable. It is easily manipulated and broken in the hands of those who do not know how to guide it. Did you see how I played with it in my hands and then broke it? I was in control. Like words implanted into the minds of those who hear, it is in control. Words are the most powerful thing you could use to either build up a person or bring them down. They are used to teach us everything that we must know, and these teachings are implanted in us. They change the way we perceive things, make decisions, and thus change the way we live our lives. Your words are so powerful, it gives you the ability to control the minds of those who hear. Titiro whakamuri kia anga whakamua. To face the future, look to the past. But what does this mean? How can we move forward when we have not learned from our past mistakes? How can we live in the past when we must move forward? We ask ourselves, what can we learn from our ancestors and past leaders about how to eradicate racial prejudices? How might we commemorate these past events in a way that helps bring justice and unity today? But there's a question I notice we fail to answer every time. Why? Why is there racism? Why is there discrimination? Madiba Nelson Mandela, 1918 to 2013, he stated, "No one is born hating another person because of the color of their skin, their background, or their religion. People learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can learn to love, for love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite." The concept of learning. Growing up, everything that we are taught, everything that we learn affects us throughout our lives. Racism is not a character trait, but it is in fact an idea that's expressed through behaviors, attitudes, institutions, and cultures. How can we solve racism if we do not understand it? Our ancestors, past leaders, how did they deal with racial prejudices? Te Witi o Rongomai, Māori spiritual leader and founder of Pariaka, combined the teachings of the Bible and traditional knowledge to teach peace and love to his people. He, alongside Te Tau Kakai and his followers, were mocked, ridiculed, humiliated, and yet the first act of peaceful resistance that worked was recorded in New Zealand. Do you know what he said when he was taken away during the invasion of Parihaka? "Be of good heart and patient. Today's work is not of my doing, but comes from the hearts of the Pakehas. Upon my fall, the Pakeha builds his work. Be steadfast in all that is peaceful." Even in his downfall, he showed no hate to those who wronged him. These teachings caught the attention of Mahatma Gandhi, former leader of India's non-violent independence movement against British rule, and in South Africa, who advocated for the civil rights of Indians. He faced ridiculous discrimination for being an Indian in South Africa and was humiliated and beaten for what he believed in. One of his most famous quotes, "The weak can never forgive. Forgiveness is the attribute of the strong." How would these teachings from these great leaders help us to eradicate racial prejudices? Well, we must first understand that racial prejudices cannot be completely eradicated. Racism is experienced, it is learned, just like how love, compassion, and forgiveness is learned. Again, the concept of learning. Racism exists whether it is acknowledged or not. It affects every single person. It's more than just a political standpoint. When we think of these great leaders, we think of their achievements and their impacts on society. But do you know what truly drove them to fight against racism? Love, forgiveness, change. What we learned from these great leaders is that because of their sense of justice, their ideologies were spread because they wanted to see a change in the way we live together as humanity. Although with these teachings, they nor us have the ability to erase racism as a whole, but through these, we can learn to reduce it and help open minds for a better society. When Gandhi says forgiveness is for the strong, he truly means people who have this open mindset, who are willing to forgive those who wrong them so that we may have a chance for a better world. We ask ourselves, how might we commemorate these past events in a way that helps bring justice and unity today? When we commemorate these events, we do it to remind the people of today that it would be a different world if those who spoke up didn't. It is a way of justifying the victims, whether it be through comedians, musicians, social groups. These events are remembered and acknowledged in different ways to bring justice and unity to our society. Former rapper Tupac Shakur, who founded Thug Life to signify the hate you give, stated in one of his most well-known songs, Changes, "Misplaced hate makes disgrace to races." He believed that hate was displaced and that hating on another person because of their race is disgraceful to anyone that does it. He used his platform as a renowned artist who shed light on a subject that's been affecting his people for years. He was contributing towards a change in a time where there was institutionalized racism in America, where policemen were more likely to be seen as heroes rather than criminals when discriminating against Black people. But in New Zealand, how might we bring justice and unity to our society? Well, There are various ways, but the first step lies between two words: Maori history. How can we move forward when the history of our Native people is unknown? Even in today's society, they are not given the justice and acknowledgement that they deserve. We turn around and judge them, and yet we don't ask ourselves, how did it come to this? Why? Because we don't know why. You can't understand something you have not learned. You can't judge the positions that they are in when you know nothing of how it came to this. Do you know how they were fooled in the Treaty of Waitangi? How their land was stolen? During the invasion of Pariaka, Maori women and girls were raped, affected with sexual diseases, and beaten. Men taken away and left to rot in jail for years with no trial. Their crime? Peaceful resistance. Our Native people were wronged for so long, and yet we turn around and judge them for the way they act, the way they dress, the way they speak, only appreciating them when their culture is convenient to us. How can we bring justice and unity? Teach the concept of learning, like how Tewiti inspired Gandhi, Gandhi inspired Martin Luther King Jr. See the cycle of learning? Learn from our ancestors, learn from our past, but understand that racism will always exist. And we must be willing to love, to forgive, to change, to reduce it. We must be willing to learn. The human brain is like a pencil, vulnerable. It is easily manipulated and broken. Everything that we are taught affects us throughout our lives. It affects our decisions and us as people. It affects me as a young Samoan woman. Ole laulau faiva ole pelu ma'ai. The tongue is the sharpest weapon. Control what you say. Think before you speak. Be critically informed of what you speak of. We must, and I will always remember this. Thank you. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Tilamai. Our next speaker is Revan Zamora, a Year 13 student from Howard College.
Imagine yourself driving towards your destination, moving forwards for you to reach that place. Traffic will come along the way and will cause you problems to getting there. But in order for you to reach your destination, you can't keep moving in a straight line. There are some instances where you have to change lanes. And for you to do that, you have to look back. This is just like us right now. We are driving to reach a peaceful place where everyone is treated equally, but traffic is hindering us from getting there. And that is racism. Some people are even contributing to the traffic right now without even realizing it, especially during the rise of coronavirus. You see, they may be judgmental towards the Asian people, but there's a bigger act of racism happening. Systemic racism. Politicians and business leaders often make decisions that systematically disadvantage one group, meaning that one group will be more privileged than the other. The confiscation of land and contribution to poverty both led to this situation. And you may think, but that was years ago. But legal, social, and economic policies and procedures are built in the patterns of the past. I would like to talk about two aspects of this today: systemic racism in housing and in healthcare. These systems may not be intentionally racist, but often in practice, they are. This plays a big role in pandemics, not only during the present, but also the past. In 1918, the Spanish flu was brought to New Zealand that resulted in 9,000 deaths. With Maori people suffered the most, as they had a death rate of 50 per 1,000 people, 8 times that of Europeans. But why is it? Why did Maori people suffer more than Europeans? Why has it been from then till now? There's a big gap between Maori and non-Maori people when it comes to daily necessities. First of all, Maori people receive less healthcare than the others. According to a recent review from the Ministry of Health, they wait longer than 3 months for their appointments, while non-Maori people wait 1 to 4 weeks. You can imagine how this impacted them during a pandemic. And imagine if you were in their shoes right now, waiting for months just to get checked out by a doctor. Not so pleasant, right? They also tended to live in cold, damp, and crowded houses, which increased their chances of catching Spanish flu. Around here, most of the Maori people live in South Auckland because of the cheaper rent. But these houses aren't ideal to live in. Society has labeled South to become a dangerous place because of Maori people living in their dodgy-looking houses. But frankly, the only thing dodgy here is the fact that Indigenous people are the ones who either have no houses or are living in poor conditions due to structural racism since the colonial era. At a recent Shift Aotearoa conference, research was shown that since 1991, there has been a rapid decline in Maori home ownership. And if the government doesn't make any structural changes at an economic level, then Maori will entirely be a population of renters by 2061, with less home opportunities than today. Well then, what does structural racism in New Zealand have to do with COVID-19? From the Spanish flu, we can learn that pandemics will test our economic inequities. Because of structural racism, Maori people are having to fit their big families into small houses, making it crowded and more in risk of catching COVID-19. Distance learning is tough in a cold and crowded house, especially to focus and to study. And the fact that not every single Maori student has a stable internet connection makes it unlikely for them to do their work and fall behind the schoolwork. Furthermore, Maori and Pacifica parents tend to have jobs that can't be done at home, meaning that they're more in risk of exposure as essential workers. If you remember my driving story and how traffic had caused us problems, what's next now? We have to change lanes. And for us to do that, we have to look back. Likewise, for us to make structural changes here in Aotearoa, we should change lanes and look in the past, learn from the past, our mistakes. We can learn that if we don't make any changes at structural level, Maori will continue to be heavily affected by this. I have many visions on what Aotearoa should look like 20 years from now. Let's take Singapore as an example, who has improved their race relations by housing. A country who is focused on creating neighborhoods and communities rather than individual assets. They only allow certain percentage of ethnicities in one area to familiarize with each other, to promote ethnic integration, and to prevent racial prejudice. The government is building lots of houses right now, especially in the South. And Housing New Zealand could try to build houses where there are Europeans, Asians, or other ethnicities to promote this idea. For young Maori people to live in a well-conditioned house, and even when they have a family, to secure a better future for their life. Surprisingly, they have tried this and there's a lot of pushbacks from those communities. In the Bible, Isaiah chapter 1 verse 17 says, "Learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, and please the widow's cause." In our world of system injustice, oppression often takes form of poverty, medical condition, and abandonment. This has been an ongoing cycle, and I'd like you to think about this today. How are you ending oppression and seeking justice? In our healthcare system, small progressive steps could be taken to achieve equity. We can start by building trusted relationships and friendships with Maori people, especially us students in school. Let us educate ourselves about cultural safety, and programs by the government could be made that targets Maori people by investing more healthcare system and support. This is just like a sandwich. The central pieces is what creates the structure, but what goes into it makes it great and different combinations work. These different combinations are the ethnicities. And why a sandwich, you may ask? Because us young people are hungry to promote racial integration. We are hungry to prevent racial prejudice both individually and systematically. Martin Luther King once said, "The moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice," meaning that change takes a long time, but it does happen. It doesn't occur in one snap or in the blink of an eye. Like King, I believe that we will reach our destination. So that at the end of our journey, no matter how long it took us to get there, we can step out of the car, breathe the fresh air, and say, "We made it." Thank you and God bless.
Thank you, Revan. Our next speaker is Caleb Todd, a Year 13 student from Sacred Heart College.
Te tangi a te manu nei, kui, tuia. Karango te pō, karango te ao I te pukorero. I te wānanga, pua whiorangi, Puta kata te marama, ahunuku ta marama ahurangi. Ka tako tō koutou I te wāwo tū. Tū wini wini, tū wana wana, tū I whakaputaina ki te wheo, ki te ao marama. Ka tū numia, ka tū rauia, ka whakaoti nuku, ka whakaoti rangi. Ko te manawa, ko tāku manawa ka irihia. Whano, whano, whano mai te toki. Hoimi e, hui e, taiki e. Ko te mihi tua tai ki te atua. Nā nei, nā mea katoa, koroaria ki tō ingoa tapu. I ngā mate, o te wā, haere, haere, haere atu rā. Koutou ki a koutou, mātou ki a mātou, tihei maurua. The vision for the future of racial relations in Aotearoa began in the year 1840. It was an act of unity between two peoples, Te Tiriti o Waitangi. The vision of an agreed partnership, each having a position of responsibility. The vision to move forward together to prosper equally. For one partner, there has been much to claim back and repair. Loss of people, language, and culture. Connection to whenua, gone, for those who were displaced, and important generational knowledge to take care of their own well-being. But still, tūpuna stood their ground. Te tero whakamuri, kia anga whakamua. To face the future, look to the past. So every person of Aotearoa has the rights and privileges agreed to in 1840. It's 2020. It's now recognized it's a good idea to learn our own history. It will restore mana. Māori have had to learn the way of Pākehā. Unity means it's time to learn what it is to be Māori. If we understand each other's past and present struggles, we can be tolerant of all those different to ourselves. In 2018, Sacred Heart College followed in the footsteps of our old boy, Sir James Clendon Hime Te Nana Tauhinari, a leader of the 28th Māori Battalion and a high achiever. It was hoped the deeds of the Māori Battalion would inspire Māori into the future, because to this point in time, Māori had lost much and were not thriving as past rangatira had envisioned. We will lose some of the most promising of our young leaders, wrote Apirana Nata. But we will gain the respect of our Pākehā brothers and the future of our race as a respected part of the New Zealand people. 3,600 men served voluntarily with the Māori Battalion. 649 were killed, 1,712 were wounded, and 237 were taken prisoner. This casualty rate was 50% higher for Māori than Pākehā. This is from a total population in New Zealand of only about 90,000 at the time. And many more Māori served in regular forces. Perhaps the great losses were because they served on the front lines, as their bravery and skill was recognized to serve king and country, by commanders like General Freyberg, even by the enemy in Rommel, valued in crucial moments to win a war that would define history for the Allied nations and their future generations. On our hikoi, it was confronting the loss of toa, seeing grave after grave after grave that made up those sad statistics. Fast forward 75 years, Māori are still on the front lines, overrepresenting statistics. An example, making up more than 50% of our present population. My Māori great-great-grandmothers sent sons to war. Their intelligence and education was recognized to serve king and country, representing all the other services. A navigator with the RAF dropping bombs on Germany. My great-grandfather, a Navy signalman. 2 more in the army, 1 working alongside US commanders in J-Force as a translator of Japanese because of the speed with which he could learn this language. Another son, a code breaker, the first Maori submariner with the British Royal Navy, commended by his comrades for his skill and speed. This karaua represents most Maori people's place in society post-war, living out his life working for the Ministry of Works in Northland. However, his understanding for the lay of the land and how it connected to the flow of the awa that he grew up on meant engineers sometimes listened to his knowledge and wisdom. His brothers seeking work available to them as wharfies and factory workers when leaving the family farm to access better lives for their families in the suburbs of Auckland. They only spoke te reo behind closed doors. There were places they could not enter simply because they were Māori. They had contributed well to their country and the Commonwealth, but still second-class citizens in their own lands, relegated to live in poorer parts of town based on how much they could earn. 2 other great-grandfathers served on the front lines, both POWs, adding more scars to whānau legacies. I have a voice here today because of how they toiled through inequality. We are no longer content to nurse a shovel on the side of the road. We have the way of these tupuna living in our blood. It is our time to be successful as Māori. Dame Whenakupa, a kuia from Mairohe once said, take care of our children. Take care of what they hear, take care of what they see, and take care of what they feel. For how the children grow, so will be the shape of our Aotearoa. He waka eke no. We're all in this together. Significant now for humanity, more so than ever. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Thank you, Caleb. Our next student is Jag Jopkur, a Year 13 student from Maclean's College.
A seed full of life, potential to succeed, is dug into the soil of Aotearoa. Planted by a unified society, its roots extended through the soil, full of stories, nurtured through love, support, and open-mindedness. Now this is the future I see, a future we should all hopefully see. Certainly, this vision and hope was what the past saw as well. Through the hardships done by our past is what we carry now, and what we will improve on for the future. It's the roots of ancestry, hard work, and leadership that got us to where we are today, the present. To the people of Aotearoa, some of us have been impacted by the colonization, and as such, we feel lost from our land and aspects of our culture. I believe by looking at the past, it will enable us to confront the needs of today so we can build platforms for tomorrow, our future. By taking a look at our past history, we have all endured a lot of pain and agony. But you see, we have come a long way from pain, but not enough to cut it off completely. We have abolished slavery, brought upon peace, not war, defeated Nazism. So it's safe to say that we're living in the most progressive time period of human history. Now I say it's not enough to cut it off completely, simply because in this multicultural and multilingual society, we have struggled to walk harmoniously alongside each other, causing the lack of unity amongst our peers, which has segregated us. The new pandemic, COVID-19, really tested our abilities to become a mature nation. In many ways, we got defeated. Corona is a corrosive virus. Ironically, so is racism. It spreads and spreads, but only we know what their biggest defeat is. And that's us, by showing maturity, becoming one, that's when they fall. A theory from my religion, Sikhism, that we live upon. If humans learn to obey the law of nature, we will have no disruptions that will affect us. Ape bij, ape hikau. Whatever seed we plant is what we eat. The day we plant the seed is not the day we eat the vegetable or fruit. It will require nurturing, watering for it to grow and attach to its roots, turning out healthy for us to eat. It's a matter of time. In my judgment, I think the seed has already been planted thousands of years ago. The truth is, today's society struggles to maintain its nourishment. The seed is fully grown in some people, and in some, it's starving. By all attempting to grow a fruitful seed inside, the impact and outcome will be strong. Now, everything needs an answer, so it must be done practically. How do New Zealand leaders and people of influence use their platform to help race relations in New Zealand to be addressed in an effective manner? The freedom of speech. It's very underrated and we don't realize its power. Many New Zealander voices are under blankets. These leaders of high authorities, i.e. the government, need to reassure that these important people are being respected and listened to. This is done by building safer communities, about learning to build whanongatanga, a relationship amongst our peers to feel protected. This uncomfortable, unspoken conversation needs to develop in a way that people don't feel condemned. This is where childish thinking comes in place. For young people to create an effect on race relations, they need to take on the lead. Because trust me, young people can change the world. They need the support wall, which is you. Justice for Indigenous people is important. This is why, to bring unity, we must commemorate past events in our country and evaluate them. History seems to repeat itself, but the people don't. Why is it that after a soulful 2019 tragedy for New Zealand, that this year's new virus that affected every one of us individually still has people that don't understand one another? 20 years from now, how will New Zealand look? We don't want these behaviors being repeated, but by educating everyone, this seed of humanity will nurture within everyone's hearts. Firstly, to foresee a stable future, we must acknowledge the people who took stand on challenging racism in today's time. Naeem Rashid, who lost his life last year at the mosque shootings,
Jacinda Ardern, who grieved and accompanied the families that lost their loved ones. Helen Wong, who peer-pressured into challenging racist views against one another. These leaders used their voices, supported the freedom of speech. Their action seen proved their connection with the people. They planted the seed where its roots affect the generations today, generations who look up to these leaders. People of our past built platforms for today that we now value and respect. When I think of our past, I envision great heroes like Kate Shepherd, Hone Heke. Alongside Heke being a warrior for our country, he invested most of his energy in people's interests. Famously, he was the first chief to sign the Treaty of Waitangi in 1840, the treaty that benefits us today, and we are more than thankful. Heke planted the seed that he further engaged with the people to teach them how to nurture it so the seed is ever growing. The action he took encouraged many others to sign too. This led to a powerful endorsement and recognition of unity on which New Zealand was founded. Hobson, who said, "He iwi tahi tato," meaning we are now one people, one citizenship, one democracy. The past seems to hold a lot of importance in Aotearoa, and it should, but we must learn the trick of using both feet. One feet to hold on and one to let go. A well-used Maori proverb, ka mua, ka muri. Walk backwards into the future, effectively addressing the past and not feeling regretful. Take, for example, the moa, flightless bird native to New Zealand. Today, its structure stands upright in the museums of New Zealand. Generations of today look and question its history, holding importance in today's society. The moa, who existed hundreds of years ago, and us who still live, both born on the land of Aotearoa, connected through the environment and nationality, believe it or not, we share a bond that comes bone to bone, connected through the soil of New Zealand, emphasizing its very essence of being a New Zealander. In this diverse society, we all share a unique bond, the human bond, attributes involving raising voices, speaking as a unified nation. Imagine when people of all kinds come to terms with he aha te mea nui te ao, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. What is the most important thing in the world? It is people, it is people, it is people. Just like the representation of myself, precisely my turban, the past should be our crown, our identity that defines us and makes us one. Because when we are one, we will have all the power to achieve anything to no extremes. The seed will evolve within everyone's hearts, and we will be sitting down underneath our great tree, viewing the abundance of blossoms and leaves. Our future will be what we worked hard for. It's our watch now. Let's make this watch count for something much more momentous. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake Jot. Our sixth and final speaker is Zoe Consejo, a Year 12 student from Avondale College.
The air was too cold. That was my first impression arriving in New Zealand for the first time. The second was the voices, the endless chatter of more languages I ever heard in my life as I walked up Queen Street for the first time. I guess it was only natural for me to idolize this amazing new country that was to be my home. I found it fascinating to see so many people of different cultures living together. I was in awe at how different everything was from Mexico, my home country. Not realizing at the time that was in fact not so different, because behind the appearances of a tolerant nation, creeping in the shadows lies an unseen culture of racism. Unseen because we choose not to see it, to keep telling ourselves that we are better than other nations. The simple truth is, ignorance and prejudice is everywhere we go. It has its roots deep in each and every one of our histories. Therefore, it is crucial that we look back at them, find their teachings, and learn from them, in the hopes that they will give us the tools we need to move forward. So I will tell you my history, hoping to add one more tool to the toolbox. Mexico was colonized by Spain in 1521. In 1531, the missionary Don Vasco de Quiroga arrived in Mexico. Unlike others, he was interested in learning from the indigenous people, who they were, what they believed in. He established himself in the western state of Michoacán, the land of the Purépecha people, by the Pátzcuaro Lake. A series of prosperous towns lived around this lake. However, with the arrival of the Spanish, many lives were lost and the remaining people lost their livelihoods. So Don Vasco, having connected with them, decided to help. He introduced a system of distribution of labor in which each town specialized in a specific craft. He did so not with the intent to colonize, but to improve the life of the people by lifting the economy, encouraging trade, and making the whole area self-sufficient. He became a very significant figure in that part of the country. The title Don in Spanish is an honorific that shows the respect people felt towards him, a respect shared by the Purépechas, who nicknamed him Tata Vasco, Tata meaning father, the generous one, or the one who looks after. Fast forwarding 400 years, it must have been around 1930. My great-grandma must have been around my age. She was born in the lake town of Pátzcuaro, where the bones of Don Vasco are stored in a church built in his honor. One day, government forces arrived to take the bones to the capital. So in order to salvage them, my great-grandma got out on the streets and started screaming, "They're taking Don Vasco's bones, they're taking Don Vasco's bones." She called upon the people to protect them, and so they did. The bells of all the churches started ringing, and everyone came out of their houses, armed with what they had at hand, brooms, stones, sticks, and they put themselves in between the army and the bones. Tata Vasco's bones for some, and Don Vasco's bones for others. But in that moment, they became one and the same, because whether wealthy or poor, indigenous or mixed, they all united behind one common goal, which put the differences aside. I hold this story very close to my heart, as it has been passed down through generations within my family, as not recorded anywhere else. I believe it's important that I commemorate it by remembering and learning from it. So even after being here for almost 5 years, I keep looking back at it. I asked my grandma to tell me the story one last time while I was writing this speech. I was curious as to how the people came together that day. And she mentioned a phrase, which for me offers an explanation as to what happened. Hunak skotanik, un solo corazón, one heart alone. It is said by the Tzeltal people of southern Mexico. It's a concept of what happens to one of us happens to all of us. It differs from the Western belief in the individual self and self-preservation, because there is no self. We all share one heart. We are all one community with one common purpose, guided by one collective project. But how do you get everyone to be part of said project? Mexico was a divided country. The few oppressed the many. There were so many different indigenous ethnicities and many social classes. So how could people so different from each other find a common cause? The key is in what they valued. And on that day, what they valued was the right to keep and honor the bones of a figure who they all collectively loved and respected. So it didn't matter if it was Tata Vasco or Don Vasco, because on that moment, it became their common project. So all this left me wondering, does New Zealand have a common project? And it doesn't. What I mean when I say a common project is a collective set of values, what we see as important and what we do to achieve it. New Zealand is a very diverse country, Auckland being the fourth most diverse city in the world. We're beginning to hear more and more these days that diversity is a good thing. And I agree with that because I believe it allows us to innovate and to grow as a society. However, only when we all work together to achieve one common goal. New Zealand having such a diverse population can be tricky because we all have different projects and they're not aligned. We're so focused on ourselves that we forget about the common good, which is not the good of our own race by itself, but the good of New Zealand as a whole. New Zealand is yet another product of colonization. Even now that we are seen by the world as a progressive and tolerant nation, we're still suffering from an injustice that never healed. We're at the point in which we could become the most tolerant nation in the world, and yet we'll have no racial unity. Because it's not about tolerating anymore, that just keeps the us and them dynamics. When we're talking about a common project that will bring about racial unity, we must emphasize it's not a matter of inclusion, but of incorporation and cooperation of races. Let's for a moment look at New Zealand as the Pátzcuaro Lake, an abundant source of opportunity and livelihood sustaining a multitude of ethnic groups. We lived through a massacre as a result of colonial conquest. Land was stolen, culture was oppressed. Those things happened and left us wounded. The bruise is still visible through everyday systemic and casual racism. A small joke, a small comment. As we cope with the disease that is ignorance and prejudice, we try to move forward. The way I see it, if the only path forward is through a common project, then we must heal as a nation first before being able to follow it. So then the question becomes, how do we heal? I believe the answer is to be educated, to learn and commemorate the histories of everyone who's here, to listen to all of our projects, just like how Don Vasco listened to the Purépechas and worked with them to improve their lives. When we have listened to all of our projects, better education, housing, environmental action, cultural awareness, once we have listened to all of them and gained a level of mutual understanding, we will be able to align them towards one common goal, our collective well-being. A recent example of unity displayed in New Zealand was a strike for climate. Young people of all races and backgrounds came together behind one collective project. We were educated about the dangers of climate change, and we set our common goal into mobilizing, to raise awareness and to tell the people in power to do something about it. That's what you call change from the bottom up, when the many demand change to the few in the power to do something. Once we have figured out our common project, that type of mobilization can be a good start. However, for the next step, we must remember, Hunax Kotanik, one heart alone. We must all work in this together. So the people of power and of influence should be part of the project, not just the finish line of it. 5 winters have passed and the cold wind doesn't bother me anymore. The indistinguishable chatter has become normal to my ears. What I hope we can stop normalizing is the discrimination that happens behind our daily lives, and our lack of action caused as a result of being focused solely on ourselves. We must not be complacent. We must all work together for a better New Zealand. And I believe in us. Animo Nova Zelanda, kia kaha Aotearoa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zoe. While the judges deliberate, we're going to take a look back at some of the highlights from the 2019 Speech Awards and Hui. The topic last year was Speaking for Justice, Working for Unity. We saw that more and more New Zealanders were recognising the need to speak out and address racial prejudice and injustice. So we asked, in a world that is becoming increasingly polarised, how do we make sure our efforts create real unity? We have 4 short videos to show you, covering each of the key themes from 2019. The first video is called Changing Individual Hearts and Minds. It's about how we can overcome our own prejudices and respond to racism in a way that helps people learn. The second video is called Changing Collective Attitudes and Norms. It explores the question of how to make our communities more unified and inclusive for people of all backgrounds. The third video is called Changing Institutions. It looks at how institutions like our government, businesses, and media can work towards race unity. The fourth video is called The Power of Speech. This clip explores how words can be used to build unity and understanding, providing they're used correctly. We had over 120 high school students make speeches on these themes last year. In addition, at the Race Unity Hui, over 150 young people attended. The Hui is a unique opportunity from youth from all around the country to come together and share opinions, engage in meaningful conversations on these topics, as well as attend numerous workshops. So what we're showing you is just the highlight reel. If you'd like to hear more of the kōrero from last year, you can watch the finalists' speeches on YouTube, or you may read the 2019 Youth Statement on Race Relations. That's available on our website, raceunity.nz. So without further ado, here is our 4-part video series, Towards Race Unity.
When we confront a racist joke or a racist comment, it's important that we do so in a way that doesn't ignite racist ideologies further. Show respect to the person behind the racist jokes. Show respect to the person behind the racist comments, because at the end of the day, like how fires can't be extinguished with more fire, racism can't be extinguished with hate, because it feeds off it.
There is so much misinformation. The easiest way to begin that process of changing how someone views the world is actually to have a conversation.
People who come to interaction with prejudiced ideas are coming from a place of ignorance. They haven't learned about the culture that they're prejudiced against, or they don't know very much, and so they're coming into that space without much understanding.
From full immersion Te Reo Māori schooling, I went to King's, which was a very different experience. I fielded a lot of questions about Māori gravy trains and things about my family being criminals. Heard some really horrible things from some of these kids that I boarded with. But when I met their parents, I saw straight away where their views came from. So I invited some of them to my marae. By meeting my family, by meeting people in my community, they changed.
This whole journey of talking about racism in New Zealand on a public platform started with personally experiencing racism and filming it, because for so many people, they didn't think that something like that could happen in New Zealand. It's still something that I think a lot of New Zealanders struggle with, because it's not their lived experience of what it means to be a New Zealander, where for so many minority communities here, it is our lived experience of being New Zealanders.
We are living in a multicultural society in New Zealand. Some people keep saying that 51 Muslims got killed in Christchurch. No doubt, they all were believers of Muslim faith, but before that, they were the New Zealanders.
We decide whether we want to teach our children, our tamariki, to play with that one kid that's darker than them, or that one kid that's lighter than them. We decide whether we love or hate the different cultures we surround ourselves with. We decide.
To be unified means to be joined as one whole. In the past, when I think of great unity on this huge scale, I think of war, disaster, segregation, death. Why is it that in our most recent history, it so often takes a tragedy or adverse event for all different kinds of people to unite?
Our communities just want to be safe, to be heard,
and to be respected. Our difference is what makes us strong, it's what makes us beautiful, but what unites us is so much stronger than what divides us.
Moving our thinking beyond the language and the behaviour of tolerance. If we want to create truly unified spaces and opportunities for people, we actually have to move towards inclusion, which is where we say, actually, I value you, I value your culture, your language, your traditions, and I'm richer and this country is better when we share those things and learn from one another.
It's really important to focus on the shared values that we all have. The idea of aroha, I think, is universal. But I think it is really difficult when our society, as I said before, is kind of programmed to be an individual, that you're focusing on your own personal success, not community and love and caring for one another.
You see, in order to attain unity, we need to make an effort to get to know people different from you. By learning about other people and their culture, your life will greatly be enriched. I also believe that we should expose the next generation to diversity at a young age. Read stories that present the different view of other groups. Discuss TV shows, movies, or books that present different stereotypes.
I think starting that conversation in your household is probably one of the most effective things that you can do, because you raise a whole generation with the skills to be able to stand up for people. But also it's about getting kids involved.
Teenagers, we're in this kind of space where we're not old enough to be leaders and seen as equal to adults. I have so many opinions. I know my friends have so many opinions, and I know so many teenagers that I hear have opinions, and we want them to be heard.
I think that I have a responsibility as a New Zealander to realize that this is our past, it's who we are. So I've got to acknowledge that.
I think in order for other people to recognize their own prejudice, it's about engaging those conversations that make you uncomfortable. It's only through getting uncomfortable that I think that we are able to step forward, and through sharing our stories, I think it creates this beautiful intersectionality between minority groups, and through that we can find empowerment for one another.
In a multicultural society, we need media sources which accurately portray our multicultural society. Portraying people of colour as the standard bearers of intelligence, success, beauty, and professionalism, along with their white counterparts.
It shouldn't take 50 lives for us to finally come together. It shouldn't take 50 lives for us to finally realize that racism still lives in New Zealand, because it's been going on for decades and decades. And we can talk and talk about racism, but if nothing ever gets done, then nothing ever changes.
No people of influence, such as government officials, teachers, or parents, should ever use language that is derogatory because of race, religion, or gender. The leaders of today are influencing the leaders of tomorrow.
We've got over 213 ethnicities represented in New Zealand. We collectively speak over 160 languages, and I strongly believe that New Zealand is strong as a nation because of this diversity and not in spite of it. However, we could do better.
We need to recognize that we are all different, but we are all New Zealanders of different shapes, colors, of different religion. I think recognizing that is probably the very first step that we need to take.
I think that one of the major things that we can actually do is acknowledge Te Tiriti o Waitangi as the founding document of this country. If we were to genuinely honour it, then our parliamentary system would be far more collaborative and creative and inclusive.
So the leadership that's required from myself and my colleagues is actually to change not only the institution, but the way the institution works across the entire government plan, across the entire community expectation.
The laws are made to safeguard and protect communities. And so long as those laws reflect the diversity of our communities and respond to the aspirations and needs of those communities, then we have no problem with what the law says.
It's important that communities see themselves reflected in our organization. The ability for us to speak the languages of our communities, the abilities for us to understand the cultures and different religious groups that are in the community.
our ethnic liaison officers. The creation of them was in around 2003, I believe, and it was in response to seeing a need amongst our ethnic community, an officer who could identify with, who could speak the languages of and totally understand where the communities were coming from.
My daughter came to me and she wanted to take a particular subject, and the teacher kind of indicated to her that perhaps she should think of other subjects. My daughter came away feeling she was told she couldn't do it. I said, I know you can do that subject. You go back to that teacher and you enroll in that subject.
Did you do it?
Yes.
Aotearoa New Zealand, we are an inclusive, welcoming country. We are, absolutely. But we must also have inclusive and welcoming attitudes in every single institution that we have, including our schools and our education system. We ask, what are the most important things that we should address in the education system? A young person will get up and say, please address institutional racism, institutional bias.
The power to re-empower those marginalised communities lies in the hands of our educational institutions. In New Zealand, Māori students are falling behind on every measure of educational outcome. However, those students who are attending Māori immersive schools actually achieve higher on all fronts, NCA, university, and employment. It's clear that systemic bias and the enduring legacy of colonisation is behind this ongoing disadvantage of Māori people. In such a multicultural society, never has it been more vital that our educational institutions place an emphasis on history, culture, and language. And I truly believe we can eradicate these educational inequalities if we cultivate culturally flexible minds and provide all students with the assurance that they have both the responsibility and the right to be there.
Words can hurt, whether you mean them to or not. You see, majority of modern day slang is still weighted with historical heartache. You see, in my culture, we have a saying, "E pala le ma'a, ai le pala tanga." Stones are rolled away, but words will never decay.
So we know that the right to free speech is one of the fundamental human rights that our actual democracy depends on. That has to be balanced against all of the other rights that ensure a free and secure democracy and that we can all participate equally. So the right to be free from discrimination.
We have to have a responsibility when we are speaking. Free speech doesn't mean that it gives us a right to attack anyone. If we want others to respect us, we have to respect others.
We can use free speech to say what we think, but through that understanding and that interaction, then we can discover more about one another. How we deliver our speech is really important. If we're angry, if we see something we don't agree with, and then we react. And so probably important to pause, to think about it, to find out more about it, and then to say something.
And the best way to share with people and to educate them is humbly. You can't say, oh, you know, you're wrong, and get really aggressive towards them, because they'll shut off. They'll feel like, oh, I'm being attacked. My own perspectives are being silenced. And then there's like that barrier to communication. So first and foremost, you need a humble posture of actually wanting to share with kindness and with love.
When you create this construct of freedom of speech, you need to ensure that things that you're saying are not only truthful, but are also respectful. And is there balance in what you're saying? Is there the right of reply?
Freedom of expression is always tempered by responsibility. In mainstream media, we hold that balance and we do get to decide who is going to be heard and who isn't. And so it's extremely important to keep that platform open for the most unheard in our communities. If your freedom of speech is oppressing another community or other people, then it's no longer freedom of speech because it's not their freedom.
No speech that we have in a public platform or in a private platform is ever in isolation. it's part of a much wider narrative that's built in from international influence and local influence. And we've got to be mindful of that.
All these powerful social platforms allow us to connect, but with connection comes responsibility.
Social media has a responsibility, where they have allowed the rapid spread of hate in the form of offensive comments, videos, and memes. They can be made accountable, because freedom of speech is not freedom to hate.
The students have made it very difficult for the judges to come to a decision. Due to the great quality of speeches that we've heard, the judges need a little bit more time. So what we'll do is we'll play videos from last year's speech awards of the winner and the runner-up.
Tuia I runga, tuia I raro, tuia I waho, tuia I roto. Tuia te here tangata, ka rongo te pō, ka rongo te ao. Tuia te moka tangata I tākia mai. Up, down, out, and then in. The tui weaves the nest of he tangata, the nest of the people. Humans woven together, united regardless of where they come from, their individual beliefs or the color of their skin. Unfortunately, there is one thing that is keeping these sticks, these individuals, from working as one together. Defects which are keeping each of these vital components from joining and crafting into the strong nest that is a unified nation. A stray, protruding branch, an awkward bend, or a rotten skeletal portion lacking in strength. This is racism. Disinclusion, unconscious bias against different ethnicities, and casual racism. The comments and jokes we all hear too frequently often on a day-to-day basis. Words that are so commonly used, which are now beginning to be accepted as the norm. Why do we give in to this racism which is holding us apart? How can we put an end to these weaknesses while also giving the people the chance to overcome their own prejudice? This is where the role of the tui comes into play. Tuis create nests. They unite and bring multiple individual pieces together, crafting them into a mesh. They create a structure which has the potential to be immensely stronger than that of each individual piece on its own. A safe home in which young can thrive. What is a tui? A leader, a call, a march, a movement, a stand, a physical structure, the voice of unity, bringing people together with common purpose, understanding, and connection. When I think of past New Zealand leaders as tuis, I think of Te Whiti o Rongomai, Tohu Kaku, and Dame Whina Cooper. In 1975, Dame Whina Cooper began leading a land march the length of the North Island with the primary aim to highlight the large amounts of Māori land loss. Now you may be asking, but surely bringing so much attention to past Māori grievances and those conflicts was a negative thing for Māori Pākehā race relations in Aotearoa. However, this was not the case. Dame Whina Cooper made her points clear in a peaceful way, which ultimately made it easier for New Zealanders to empathise. Possibly for some to forgive, to remember, but most importantly, to move forward. Dame Whina Cooper heard the message. Let us all remember that the Treaty of Waitangi was signed so that we could live as one nation in Aotearoa. With this march, Dame Whina Cooper was a tui as she weaved the nest of the New Zealand people by raising the public's awareness as to how deeply the Māori are connected to their land and how much they were suffering as a result of their losses. On my doorstep, in my forest, former Mayor of New Plymouth, Andrew Judd, is also a tui. He crafted his nest when he also did a hikoi from New Plymouth to Pariaka. Once a self-proclaimed racist, he saw what he used to see in himself attached like that awkward branch or protruding bend throughout the places around us, and in the common words many of us unknowingly speak every day. He knew something had to change. He put aside his past and his peace march stamped, a monumental mark on race unity for the Taranaki region. A Pākehā leader taking a symbolic hikoi like that of Dame Whenekupa before him, with the goal of amending differences, working towards a better future, and giving nothing to racism was extremely significant. Now, even though the two examples I've mentioned previously are examples of human leaders as tuis, other tuis which also weave the nest to unite people from multiple different ethnicities and worldviews come in many different forms. From a central government stance supporting the creation of buildings of national significance, such as Te Papa in Wellington, which are extremely important in providing educational spaces in which we can learn to appreciate other cultures. To at a regional level, where local councils support events such as the recent multi-ethnic extravaganza, a parade which stays as a showcase, allowing us to celebrate the diversity in our communities. Both these examples are tuis and are effective at weaving the nest of the people by helping us see that as humans, our similarities far outweigh our differences. To be unified means to be joined as one whole. Now, I'm not talking about my friend and I agreeing on something or the groups at our school getting along. I'm talking about something much more monumentous. The unity of all different kinds of people everywhere. In the past, when I think of great unity on this huge scale, I think of war, disaster, segregation, death. Why is it that in our most recent history, it so often takes a tragedy or adverse event for all different kinds of people to unite? To see past the color, to see past the jobs, to see past the religious beliefs. Here in New Zealand, take the recent forest fires in Nelson, the earthquakes in Kaikoura and Christchurch, and most prominently and recently, the terror mosque shootings 2 months ago. Although the situations were different, the outcome was the same. Humans coming together and forming a tight nest. These tragedies, these downs, these breaks in our nest are devastating, and it is important that we do support those who are affected. But it is equally important to see that there are opportunities for us to focus on what we all as humans have in common every second of the day. Our need for shelter, love, care, and support. So all of us sticks, components to the nest, should all be proud individuals for our attributes, but also understand that together we can complement each other and create something much bigger and stronger than ourselves. For once, we, pieces of this grand nest, discard that protruding branch, bend, or scab and say no to those racial attitudes and jokes which are pushing the sticks in our nest further and further apart. The nests in our communities will be grand and strong. They'll be the safe place for the bird of Aotearoa, New Zealand, to grow and develop. A beautiful, strong bird which can one day soar away onto great things. Mā te uru ka rere te manu. Without the feathers, the bird cannot fly. With feathers of knowledge, compassion, and understanding, and a strong nest made of many different sticks of many different shapes, sizes, and colors to call home, this bird will achieve truly spectacular things. Kia ora.
Ngā ole ngaka e whasia e pupula o ngā maka. Only the snake will look at its killer. 24th of September 1905, race killing in Wellington. 9th of November 1920, white New Zealand policy introduced. 7th of May 1999, anti-Chinese hysteria in Dunedin. 15th of March, 2019, Christchurch mosque shooting. For so many years, New Zealand has suffered through violent attacks, with racism being the backbone of each one. From the moment New Zealand became colonized to the moment I stand here today and say racism still lives. Now, have you ever wondered what has been done to change this? I mean, we as New Zealanders can say we're a diverse country, but can we really say we've done a lot to put an end to racism? And the answer is no. Because in reality, racism has a home in New Zealand. And we have been reminded of this in 1905, 1920, 1999, and 2019. You know, sometimes I sit and wonder if we actually know the true meaning of racism. You know, according to the dictionary, racism is the belief in the superiority of one race over another. Yet here in Aotearoa, it is much more than that. I mean, racism can mean that when I can't pronounce Māori words properly, or when I call these three fine young men here white. You see, I personally don't believe that that is racism, because I believe that the true meaning of racism lies in us. We as society give racism meaning. We as society give racism a platform to destroy lives. We as a society give racism the opportunity to claim our history, to claim us. But I do believe that we can claim it back, because our country has come so far. You look at all the things we can work on. And I believe that there are 4 key points that we can work on to put an end to racism: inclusion, acceptance, love, and education. Let's begin with inclusion. You see, I believe that nowadays we have a very hard time in including people into things. You know, we have that idea that people are better off in their own communities, in their own little space. But the thing is, racism will never end and equality will never happen if we keep dividing each other. If we keep including some, but not all. Because at the end of the day, this isn't my world, this isn't your world, this is our world. And that's why we need to include everyone. Because no matter who you are, no matter what you do, we all contribute something to our country. We become rich in our diversity. Acceptance. We have a very hard time accepting people. You know, you're not always going to walk out your door and meet people who are the same to you. You're going to walk out your door and meet people who are different, who dress differently, who may act differently. And you see, acceptance is not just about being kind to one another and being nice. It's also about having that knowledge that people are different and that it's okay to be different. Because why live in a world where everyone's the same? Love. I strongly believe that we should show love towards each other. Because you see, I have a cousin who is Samoan and Dutch, has no Māori blood in him, but he literally embraces the Māori culture like its own. And then it got me thinking, why can't we show that type of love towards others? Why can't we embrace it? I mean, we poured our hearts out to our Muslim community down in Christchurch, but why is it that people have to die in order for this to happen? And why is it that us Kiwis have to pick one day out of 365 to show that love and to embrace the culture? Why is that? Which leads me to education. You see, at the end of it all, we decide whether we want to teach our children, our tamariki, to play with that one kid that's darker than them, or that one kid that's lighter than them. We decide whether we love or hate the different cultures we surround ourselves with. We decide, because it begins with us. And that's why we need to teach that inclusion, that acceptance, that love, because these are our responsibilities as society today. You know,
I hope you enjoyed those videos. Please feel free to share them on social media so more people can hear the kōrero on unity and justice. If you'd like to take part in the Race Unity Hui this year, that should be happening sometime later on in the year, and we'll have more information up on our website soon. Now, I understand that our judges have come to a decision, so I'll hand over to our Chief Judge, Ryan Mearns from the Human Rights Commission.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you everybody for participating tonight. All those speeches were amazing. I'm going to go through first off and I'll do some feedback. I'll keep it quick, I promise, for each of the speeches in order, although do I have all my sheets are jumbled up. Cool, so we'll start and then we'll do the I'll announce the runner-up and the winner tonight. So first off, we have Olivia. So thank you so much, Olivia, for speaking tonight. Your speech, unfortunately, was a bit over time, so that's something to work on in future. But in general, you had a lot of content and a lot of really sharp critiques within your speech, which I found really powerful. The way you talked about showing an appreciation for the role of culture in race unity, I think showed a knowledge and understanding of what race unity was about. You're really well spoken and you came across really well. I would any feedback though, I would think about how in your speech just cutting some of the sentences up, just to make sure that rather than feeling like you're sort of going these like long sort of soliloquies, you sort of can feel quite punchy through your speech. But in general, you showed a good understanding and critique of the limits of the Waitangi Tribunal to do all the work that's needed, and how New Zealand's history feeds into the story of race unity in New Zealand. So in general, really great, and thank you so much for all your hard work. But definitely have a think about your time and how long the speech was, and maybe cut a few bits out of it. What do we have next? Tilo Mai. Cool. So a really fantastic use of prompt and tool with your pencil. It really created a strong opening to your speech, and your sort of central proposition for your speech around the power of words. Really anchored what was going to come. You had really good rhythm and tone and pace with your speech, which really helped the ideas be communicated to us as an audience really well. I liked the way you tied in the role of commemoration as a tool of racial reconciliation. It shows a good understanding of what's needed in New Zealand, and actually some of the processes that the country's been going through as part of that. You really answered the question which we asked, which is about looking from the past and looking to the future. So that was really strong and precise. And I think the way you mixed your own cultural understandings throughout the speech really added depth to it, and really added a personal feel and a narrative that came across quite powerfully to us as judges. And obviously at the end of it, you hooked back into that. You went back to your sort of pencil metaphor and that single hook about how we can learn from the past. I would ever think about even getting more specific about what, so you talk about learning from the past and Māori history, but taking it even one step further, like what does that look like in a really practical example, and a practical idea, moment, time, something that really just takes it all the way down from the sort of meta top ideas all the way down to that sort of what does it look like at the grassroots. But in general, your speech was great, and yeah, I think definitely you should definitely feel proud of it. Riven, I've got next. Cool. So yeah, really like the way you orientated your speech around not looking back. Obviously, that was the idea that you were given. The way you orientated your speech around sort of the policy details and around housing and health, I think showed a really novel way of approaching the Race Unity Speech Awards. Showed an understanding and a sort of research that I think that is really admirable. And I really want to thank you for all your hard work you did with that. I would think about with your speech though, getting this sort of restructuring a little bit. It jumped around a little bit as you sort of bounced back and forth between your different examples. So I would try and just think about how do you have, think about a speech as like a bunch of chapters, and each sort of minute and a half you're telling a new chapter in your story. And rather than sort of trying to sort of loop back constantly between different pieces of subject matter, it's just a way of creating a cleaner version of the speech, and will just help to add impact. But in general, you had a good manner and presence for us, I thought your speech was really great, and really showed a good and deep understanding of the issues. And I really hope you pursue some of these issues in your future academic careers, or your career as well, because I think there's more and more people that need to work on some of these issues. It's serious problems out there. So thank you so much. Hopefully that's helpful. Cool. And then we've got Callum. Really strong speech, really strong presence that you have on stage or in the camera. I think the way you really started from your own story was really powerful, and how you linked that into what is called in sort of speech terms like a public narrative. So a story of you, story of us, and the story of now. And so you really, by using your Māori Battalion story and how you were connected to that, really showed a depth of knowledge and understanding, and it was a good way of having your view, having your the ideas you were trying to get across, really in a powerful way. So I think it showed a lot of insight that you were able to connect those two. And I think I loved your line when you said that Māori Battalion were on the front line of the war, in the front line, and we're still on the front line of some statistics today. It showed a really good novel concept of looking back. I would have a think about how you get sort of having a really strong call to action. You sort of had some calls to what needs to be done, but I would think about a little bit more about what are the specific things that sort of your story. So if you think about you're telling a story of like you personally as us, and then a story of now, and I think figuring out what that now really looks like, what change needs to be created, would be really powerful. That could look like some of those lessons that remembering history, all that sort of stuff. But I would just have to think about how to sort of weave that to really give the end of your speech that sort of real nail in the that sort of punch at the end that would sort of finish it off. But great speech in general, and yeah, your presence and your really eloquent was really great. So thank you so much. Jagjot, I like the way that you use some really contemporary examples and an understanding of how COVID and 19 and racism are sort of interlinked, and how, but also then flipping that on its head and taking us all the way back into the treaty and the history. I think you showed a nice bunch of inflections and pace within your speech. I would have to think about even sort of sharpening up your central proposition, just because you sort of bounce to a lot of content, it sort of sometimes loses its thread. So I would just have to think about how you can sort of create a really strong line amongst your sort of subject matter. So as sort of viewers of it, we can feel like you're telling a story that is sort of quite sort of either sequential or you're unpicking individual pieces of art, individual arguments. It would just add the next layer to your speech that would strengthen it even more. But in general, it was really great, and thank you so much for all your hard work. And lastly, Zoe, really cool to hear your own personal narrative as a New Zealander, and how that how your history has manifested itself. I think you really had some interesting commentary around Mexico and stuff. I learned stuff as part of your speech, and then you tried to fold that into the contemporary with the school strikes, and a commentary around what inclusion looks like. I would have a think about though how just linking your sort of personal narrative and story in just sort of a bit of a deeper way to unpick. So have a think about how your story links to the wider story of race relations in New Zealand. So I think if you can fold those two together, you might find that there's sort of a powerful proposition within that. It probably just needs a little bit more work around that sort of, where within the race relations space does your story, what can it teach us about New Zealand? It was a great speech and a great, narrative unpicking, but it probably just needed a little bit more around the sort of critical thinking around race relations in New Zealand. So I'd have a think about that and have a think about what you can sort of fold into it to show your depth of understanding about New Zealand. And that could look like, look stuff around the treaty, some of the injustices there, how that relates to the story in Mexico. Have a think about that. But in general, I get sort of captivated. I didn't actually write many notes because I was so focused on your speech and hearing from it. So I really enjoyed the novelness of it. So great speech, and thank you so much. Cool. Hopefully that was useful, and feel free to reach out to me, Rick, or Sean as well if you want any further feedback on your speeches. We're happy to provide those. I think we can provide them for an email. We can provide our emails afterwards. But I will now announce the results, starting with the runner-up. So the runner-up we had tonight was Callum Todd. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. And our winner tonight was Tilo Mai.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome.
So congratulations to our Auckland winner, Tilamai, and to our runner-up, Calum. But to all the students, it's evident that you've all devoted lots of time towards crafting your speeches, and we thoroughly enjoyed listening to all of them. It's not an easy task to write a speech, practice it, and then present it, especially in the middle of a pandemic. So you should all be very proud of yourselves. You've proven to us that you are hardworking and courageous individuals. Now, race unity is like a waka. The more people we have on board paddling, the closer we'll get to our destination. You have all shown us that you are playing vital roles on that waka, so we thank you for that. The Race Unity Speech Awards were instigated and have been organised by the New Zealand Baha'i community since their inception in 2001. The Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Auckland have asked me to pass on their congratulations to all the participants in the regional competition, and they have provided gift vouchers for each of the finalists, with a value of $80 for the winner, Tilamai, $50 for the runner-up, Calum, and $30 to all the other finalists. These will be mailed out to them. The students will also receive certificates relevant to their success in the competition thus far. Now, we're so grateful to have this amazing technology, allowing us to stay communicated and connected with one another during the times that we're in. So I'd encourage you, if you haven't done so already, to pick up the phone, call your friends, call your whānau, and share your speeches to them. And later on, when school schedules return to normal, I'd encourage you to consider presenting your speech at a full school assembly, and we'd love to hear from you if you do so. The speeches we've heard today are a great encouragement for each of us to go away and start to have a think about how can we foster positive race relations in our own communities. As we're nearing the end of the program, just a reminder that all 6 speakers tonight have qualified to present their speeches at the national semi-finals that will be occurring next week on Monday the 11th, Tuesday the 12th, and Wednesday the 13th, and that will be live streamed here on YouTube. Then from the national semi-finals, the top 6 students will present their speeches at the national final, occurring on Sunday the 17th of May, and that will also be live streamed here on YouTube. I would like to say a massive thank you to our speakers for inspiring us, to their support people from school and at home, to our judges, Ryan, Rebecca, and Sean, to our timekeeper, Sophia, to our Auckland coordinator, Eric, and to the national team who have been doing so much behind the scenes. But also a big thank you to everybody else who helped make tonight possible. That draws the Auckland final to a close. Thank you for watching.
Wait a minute.